You canceled the reservation. What does that mean? I tightened my hold on my phone and moved away from my work desk to a peaceful nook of the corridor. This Saturday is the engagement celebration. Weeks ago, we sent out invitations. The cost of the venue was just too much. Jen, my mother's voice had the studied composure she employed when breaking bad news. I spoke with your father about it, and we simply cannot defend spending so much money on a party. We'll come up with something better. Suitably, anger was starting to flush my face. My ideal location was the Riverside Terrace. Since I was 16, I have discussed holding significant events there. Dreams must be in line with reality, my love. I've been examining some quaint restaurant back rooms lately that would be ideal. We have already made a deposit. I cut you off. By canceling now, how much could you possibly save? A revealing silence. Jenna, it's not just about the cash. It all comes down to having realistic expectations for the future. Given David's history, it might be wiser to begin with something more modest. My stomach did not growl at the obvious implication. Soon after knowing that the decision had already been made, I hung up the phone, vowing to discuss it further later. I'm Jenna Whitfield, a 29-year-old woman who has spent her adult life demonstrating that she can succeed on her own, even though she grew up in Cincinnati's exclusive Amberley Village area with affluent parents. Without my father's connections, I was able to establish a prosperous career in architectural design. Without using my trust cash, I purchased my own condo and fell in love with David Chen, a talented software developer who had little growing up but achieved remarkable success, even though his modest attire and humble manner were invisible to my parents. All I wanted was one day, one ideal celebration where my worlds would collide and David and I would declare our engagement in front of our loved ones in a setting that felt unique. Now, with only a week's warning, my parents had taken away even that. My sister Vanessa texted me as I was making my way back to my desk. I just heard about Riverside from Mom. I apologize. However, there is a bright side. To make up for the embarrassment to the family, she is upgrading the location for my birthday. Isn't that fantastic? Before the meaning finally dawned on me, I read the message 3 times while staring at it. The expense had prevented them from canceling. Because they were ashamed of David and our engagement, they had canceled. It wasn't even the worst part somehow. The weekend following our postponed engagement celebration was my sister's birthday. Being raised in the Whitfield household taught me that outward appearances were the most important thing. Through relationships made at charity galas and on golf courses, my father became the biggest commercial real estate company in Cincinnati. My mother made sure our family name was mentioned in all the appropriate society sections while serving on the boards of the city's most prominent cultural institutions. Vanessa, who was 2 years younger than myself, flourished in this setting. She followed the family tradition by dating only guys from suitable origins and going to law school because it was required of her rather than because she was passionate about it. She turned out to be my parents' ideal daughter, polished, dependable, and entirely consistent with their principles. I went in a different direction. I designed community centers in underprivileged neighborhoods while I was a college volunteer. After graduation, I turned down my father's offer of a corner office at Whitfield Properties in favor of joining a small cutting-edge architectural company that specialized in sustainable design rather than joining my mother's sorority. Even if they didn't comprehend it, I felt my parents admired me for paving my own path, even though every decision we made grew farther apart. Then, while giving a presentation on smart building design at a tech convention, I ran across David. He asked the most perceptive questions of incorporating technology into architectural spaces, while remaining modest in his faded jeans and basic button-down shirt. After that, we spent hours chatting at a coffee shop nearby. He was intelligent, compassionate, and surprisingly sincere. I had realized that my parents' social group lacked certain qualities. I took David home for dinner after we had been dating for 6 months. My parents questioned him sharply about his schooling during the anxious evening. His family is middle class, and he attends a state school on scholarship. His dad was a high school instructor. His mom is a nurse. When David remarked that he still drove his college automobile, a 15-year-old Honda that was in excellent condition, my father hardly disguised his disgust. Well, he's resourceful at least. Later that evening, as though thrift were a foreign quality my mother had said to me, she was making an effort to be understanding. Instead of obsessing over his wealth or lineage, I decided to think they simply needed time to get to know the man I saw to appreciate his sharp mind and giving nature. 6 months later, David proposed with a straightforward yet significant ring that he had made himself. My folks promptly proposed a lengthy engagement and gave me a tepid congrats. My father had stated that marriage is a lifelong commitment, just to be sure. You want to get to know someone well before you do that? In reality, he was hoping that I would change my mind and find someone better. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signals. They had grudgingly agreed to have an engagement party, but it was never going to happen. 3 days after the cancellation, the final confirmation was received. I had been avoiding my parents' calls until I unexpectedly dropped by their place. Before I faced them, I need time to absorb my fury. I saw more automobiles parked outside my aunt's Mercedes as I entered the curved driveway, my sister's BMW, and my father's business partner's Range Rover. They were gathering around floral arrangements and catering samples in the sunroom when I found them. My mom was pointing excitedly at what seemed like a table arrangement. The natural light on the terrace along the river is really beautiful. As she spoke, the head table was set up here with a view of the river. What is this? My voice broke through the happy chit-chat. 5 surprised heads turned to face me. My mom was the first to recover. We were unaware of your visit, Jenna. Details for Vanessa's birthday party at the Riverside Terrace are still being finalized. There was no question. There was an awkward silence. Suddenly, my aunt's phone piqued her curiosity. My father's business partner slipped away after whispering something about a call he had to make. At least Vanessa was polite enough to display embarrassment. Mom argued that the location was ideal and already available, but I told her it was too soon after your incident. Are you available because my reservation was canceled by you? I said despite the fury roaring inside of me. My voice was uncannily calm. My dad straightened his golf shirt and stood up. Let's talk about this in private, Jenna. Why everyone in this room is already aware of what occurred. After canceling my engagement party on the grounds that it was too costly, you reserved the same location for Vanessa's birthday. The explanation would be very appreciated. It's not that easy, sweetheart. My mother started out with the guest list we've created for Vanessa's celebration, her society smile firmly in place. The riverbank is a logical choice. My guests and the relationships your father can build there weren't significant enough. It wasn't worth celebrating. Your mother is not saying that. My dad stepped in. We've been understanding during this stage of your life, Jenna. The tiny flat, the job at that little company, and now David. David, my tone became stern. How is this related to my fiancé? My parents exchanged a glance that I had seen much too often. The one that came before some hard reality they felt compelled to tell me for my own benefit. He simply isn't appropriate. At last, my mom said, not for a person with your history. Although he is decent enough, he lacks ambition, familial ties, and anything other than love, respect, and support. I argued against things that are truly important, heavy on my father's side. Jenna, your fiancé isn't suitable for this family, and you know it in your heart. All we're attempting to do is keep you from making a mistake that you'll come to regret. The words struck like blows to the body. Although I had a gut feeling they didn't approve, hearing it spoken so directly astounded me. I was in the middle of getting ready for my sister's party, not mine. At last, I had a clear view of my parents. Their hollow ideals, their conditional love, and their unwavering belief that they were right. With my head spinning, I left without saying another thing. They had never really known the man I loved, and they had rejected and judged him. I also questioned whether they knew me for the first time. That night, David and I sat in my condo. As I told him what had happened, tears running down my cheeks. Silently, he listened. He looked sad rather than angry. He grasped my hands in his when I was done. I apologize for causing you pain, he added quietly. However, I'm not shocked by their feelings toward me. I assumed they would at least make an effort to learn more about you. Wiping my eyes, I said, I believe that family was more important than money. David smiled at me sadly. Only those who already comprehend something can recognize its value. I don't fulfill the criteria your parents used to determine my value. His cool acceptance just strengthened my resolve. I abruptly offered that we throw our own engagement party, something straightforward but significant. The terrace by the river is unnecessary. We don't require their consent. David paused. Jenna, are you certain that this is your family? You don't want to break up contact with them because of me. You're not the cause, I told him. It's how they act. Let's do this our way, please. I turned my hurt into action throughout the course of the following 2 days. In addition to reaching out to friends, I created digital invites and located a gorgeous rooftop venue at a nearby brewery. It was coming together quite nicely. a celebration that was true to who we were, not what my parents believed we ought to be. On Friday morning, Vanessa's mother called and asked the Hendersons to my celebration. The Hendersons, she said without introducing herself. Like the family of Jonathan Henderson. I felt sick to my stomach. Vanessa's ex-boyfriend was Jonathan. He was the son of a well-known banking family that my parents had loved. When Vanessa ended their relationship last year, they were crushed. Brad, a pharmaceutical sales representative, was seen as beneath her up to this point. The invitation made all the sense now. They were attempting to plan a reunion. She says it's because his father is thinking about funding his new venture. Vanessa went on, but we both understand what she's doing. In reality, she didn't send Brad an invitation, but she claimed that family matters were the reason for the party's cancellation. I closed my eyes, realizing what they had done to me and the pattern she was following with you. Not exactly, said Vanessa. Remember that I'm their golden child. They won't call off my celebration. All they're doing is attempting to dictate who I celebrate it with. However, I sincerely apologize for what they said to you, Jenna, concerning David. It was unjust and unkind. Vanessa had never been this close to publicly scolding our parents. I briefly believed I had found an ally. Why don't you and David attend your own engagement celebration with us? We'll have our celebration right in front of them if you bring Brad. I proposed to warm up to the notion of this minor uprising. There was silence in the queue. I am unable to accomplish it. At last she spoke. During the party, Dad announced that I had been promoted to junior partner at the firm. Jenna, I've been working for this for 3 years. I cannot put it in danger, not even for you. My chest began to feel the same old disappointment. So long as there's something in it for you, you'll allow them to control your life. How about Brad? I'll compensate him. Take a look. We can't all afford to sour relations with the family. Jen, there are those of us who have pragmatic concerns. I sat at my desk and stared at the partially completed invites on my computer screen after we hung up. It seemed hollow, even my little show of freedom. Right now, the folks who ought to care the most would not care if I threw my own party. Without me, my family would still be celebrating across town. Go on as though my decisions and emotions were unimportant. That's how David found me. An hour later, as I wrapped my engagement ring around my finger and watched it sparkle in the light, I pondered whether I was up against an impossible war. David was already dressed and enjoying coffee on our tiny balcony when I woke up on Saturday morning, the day of what should have been our engagement celebration. When I joined him, I was thinking, perhaps we should attend Vanessa's party. When I took my first drink of coffee, I almost choked. For what reason would we put ourselves through that? Because it feels like they've triumphed when we flee and throw our own party. But showing up, being ourselves, and not letting them dictate our actions? He continued thoughtfully. We're holding our ground. I told you they would treat you horribly. They'll treat you like you're invisible and make crude remarks. David gave a shrug. I'm already viewed as inadequate by them. What could possibly go wrong? My hands were shaking from the tension I had worked myself into by the time we got at the Riverside Terrace that night. The location was breathtaking. Windows from floor to ceiling with a view of the Ohio River. Elegant dining sets are illuminated by a warm glow from a crystal chandelier. Arrangements of flowers that most likely cost more than my rent each month. My mom was the first to notice us. After a brief moment of her prepared smile failing, she regained her composure and swept over Jenna. How unexpected. David, too. She spoke more softly. This is a private family gathering, darling. You were not invited by us. I know, I responded, adding strength to my voice while maintaining her low tone. You were pretty clear about my position. However, I'm still here to support Vanessa since she's still my sister. The smile tightened on my mother's face. Naturally. How responsible of you. Please try not to bring up your predicament this evening. We're celebrating Vanessa tonight. She stepped aside to welcome more visitors. David gave my hand a squeeze. Are you all right? I said I would be. Even though I was losing confidence, the evening went horribly. My dad hardly gave us a look. Instead, he concentrated on the Hendersons, especially Jonathan, who had been placed behind Vanessa. My parents' acquaintances frequently mistook David for waitstaff, excluding her from talks, and served her last at supper, despite her apparent discomfort. My father's toast was the last straw. He smiled at Vanessa as he stood at the head table with the champagne flute up. He declared, tonight we're not just celebrating a birthday, but a remarkable young woman who embodies the Whitfield values. Vanessa has demonstrated a commitment to upholding family customs, achieving professional success, and forming the ideal relationships for a prosperous future. He looked thoughtfully from Vanessa to Jonathan Henderson and back again. I'm actually pleased to say that Vanessa has been elevated to the position of junior partner at Whitfield Properties, where she will assist in spearheading our innovative new partnership with Henderson Financial Group. I sat stunned in disbelief as the applause broke out. This was not merely a professional announcement or even a birthday celebration. A planned family company merger would tie Vanessa to Jonathan through their parents' businesses, making it more and more difficult for her to follow her own path. Suddenly, everything became very clear. I knew what was going on. This has nothing to do with David's shortcomings. It has to do with control, about preserving the Whitfield dynasty according to their wishes. I felt David tense by my side as the knowledge hit. My father was deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize, and I followed his gaze. The guy continued to look at us, his face changing from one of incredulity to one of something like awe. I muttered, "Who's that guy, David?" tightly. Robert Maxwell answered, Pinnacle Tech's CEO. David was on his feet before I could inquire as to why the CEO of one of the biggest tech firms in the nation would be interested in us. "We have to go now." As we snuck out, I had a final glimpse of Robert Maxwell dragging my father away and pointing at us with a decided intensity. Something had changed, although I wasn't sure what it was yet. "Will you explain what that was about?" As we drove home, I questioned the glow of the dashboard lights, revealing the stiffness in David's jaw. His shoulders relaxed a little as he sighed. "I've been working on the project for the last 3 years. Do you remember? The one I was unable to discuss much. The healthcare predictive analysis algorithm. The one that always comes up when I inquire about it." Regarding his work, I had always respected his privacy, assuming that the confidentiality was normal for a startup. With a rueful smile on his lips, David looked at me. "It's finished, Jen. The testing, the development, everything. For the past month, I've been in acquisition negotiations." As I processed this information, I blinked. That's incredible. However, what relevance does that have to tonight's events? My software is being purchased by Robert Maxwell's company. The sale is finalized on Monday morning. The ramifications began to become clear. Is it significant? David's laugh was not amusing. Small acquisitions are not made by Pinnacle Tech. My phone burst with notifications before I could hit any more buttons. My mother left 2 missed calls, my father 3 missed calls, and Vanessa texted me. "How on earth did your fiancé act?" "Maxwell and Dad are going crazy." I showed the text to David. "Would you mind telling me the rest?" David took out his laptop when we got home and showed me the press release that was supposed to be released on Monday. As I read, my eyes grew wide. BioPredict is purchased by Pinnacle Tech for $175 million. I looked up from the TV and gasped. "This is going to change your life, David." He nodded. "That explains my recent lack of focus, the planning, the legal assessments, and the discussions." He grabbed my hands. "I wanted to let you know, but until the deal concluded, the secrecy obligations were unchangeable." As I connected the dots, my mind was racing. "So tonight, you were recognized by Robert Maxwell." He was speaking to my father for that reason. David apparently combed through his hair. "I suppose he assumed your father was already aware of my identity." At that moment, my phone rang once again. My dad. After hesitating, I responded on the speaker. His tone was strangely submissive as he started. "Are you with David? I would really like to talk to him about a possible opportunity." "Dad, it's almost midnight," I said calmly. How could the opportunity be so urgent to pause? According to Robert Maxwell, David's business has created some amazing medical technology. We would be very interested in talking about possible partnerships as Whitfield Properties expands into the medical office industry. It was breathtakingly audacious. My father didn't even bother to recognize David's existence a few hours ago. He was now rushing to make contact because he saw a business opportunity. I responded, "Actually," as a strategy began to take shape. "We would love to talk more about this. Tomorrow, how about brunch?" Let's say 11 a.m. on the Riverside Terrace. My father accepted without hesitation and said he would set things up right away. David hung up and gave me a curious look. "The terrace by the river, are you certain?" "Of course," I said, my resolve getting stronger. "They can meet where our engagement party should have been if they want to discuss business. Additionally, they might confront who you really are rather than who they thought you were." David grinned, but his face was still worried. "Jen, I never wanted our relationship to be influenced by my job or financial status. I dress simply and drive an old automobile because of this. I desired to be appreciated for my thoughts rather than my wealth. And you have my appreciation for it. I gave him my word. But money isn't the point of tomorrow. It's about regaining our dignity on our own terms and demonstrating to my parents the negative effects of making snap judgments about others based just on appearances. We were getting ready for bed. My father texted me and my phone chimed. Brunch was confirmed. Private room with a riverbank terrace. I'm eager to talk with David about this wonderful opportunity. We had prepared the ground for our own kind of justice. In the daytime, the terrace beside the river had a distinct appearance. More transparent, less intimidating. The polished flooring were covered in large rectangles of light as the sun shone through the windows. Today you can't hide in the shadows. Having meticulously set their Sunday best faces in welcoming looks, my parents were the first to arrive. Apparently, Vanessa's curiosity overcame her discomfort. She had brought Brad with her. I quietly admired this modest gesture of defiance. I went in. Last, followed by David. He was dressed in the same basic pants and button-down shirt that he had on when we first met. We talked about a conscious decision that morning. I wore modest yet professional attire. Not Whitfield, but architect Jenna the heir. David, it's great to see you once more. Booming, my father held out his hand with renewed vigor. Robert Maxwell says your work is excellent. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for setting this up, David said courteously. His manner remained the same as in all of my previous encounters with my parents, courteous yet unimpressed with their position. My father began a clearly prepared speech on great synergies and mutual prospects after we had taken our seats at the table and coffee and mimosas had arrived. With intermittent touches to David's arm to highlight a point, my mother nodded in agreement. It was the same David she didn't want to talk to directly when my father finally took a breath a week ago. With David's consent, I set a folder containing a copy of the acquisition documents on the table. With composure, I said before we continued, "We should be explicit about what we're talking about, in my opinion." I turned the folder to my parents and opened it. David is not only creating medical technology. Tomorrow, Pinnacle Tech will pay $175 million to acquire BioPredict, which he established. As he scanned the document, my father's face turned pale. My mother's eyes darted from David to the paper, and her smile froze. I think Whitfield Properties actually approached Pinnacle last year about partnering on their medical campus, but they were turned down, I added. Dad, isn't that correct? The ensuing hush was deafening. My dad cleared his throat. Perhaps for the first time in his career, he lost his composure. I didn't realize how much David was involved, he said. This is undoubtedly stunning. My mom got better faster. David, you need to have informed us all earlier. We considered. Realizing there was no proper way to complete that sentence, she trailed off. What did you think? He drives an old Honda, so I pointed out that he wasn't good enough, because he doesn't flaunt his connections or fortune. Vanessa had fresh eyes as she gazed at David. Hold on, forecast. Last year, Brad applied for a job there. They are really picky. Brad gave a sheepish nod. After the second interview, I failed. There are too many competent applicants. David selects employees based on their qualifications and moral fiber. I did not describe their relationships or lineage. New idea. Is it not? The man was beginning to realize the implications. The engagement was rejected. They had attempted to ruin the festivities. They had canceled everything on the basis of shallow and incorrect value judgments. Clearly we miscalculated, my father responded sternly. Maybe we could start over and throw you to a formal engagement celebration at the riverside. Naturally, no cost was eschewed. David gave me a slight gesture of encouragement when I turned to face him. I claimed that wouldn't be required. Next Saturday, we will celebrate on the rooftop of Mill Creek Brewery. Easy, meaningful, surrounded by those who have always been there for us. I got up from my chair and went on. I didn't come here to apologize or to convince you that something else is more important. I come to help you realize how much your judgment has cost you. A daughter who needs you to see beyond your own limited idea of value, not just a successful son-in-law. Leaving my parents to reflect on the real price of their shallow expectations, I took David's hand and left the riverside terrace for the second and last time.